Hello, class. We now have arrived at chapter 16 in Matthew's Gospel. Verse 1, we read, the Pharisees and Sadducees came up and testing Jesus, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. But he replied to them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, there will be a storm today, for the sky is red and threatening. Do you know how to discern the appearance of the sky, but not be able to discern the signs of the times? And an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and a sign will not be given it except the sign of Jonah. And he left them and went away. Now we look at the bullets. As Jesus returned to Israel, he was again confronted by religious leaders. They tested him by asking for a sign from heaven. By this, they were again saying that they were rejecting all the signs he had performed before their eyes up to this point. They were, in effect, asking Jesus to give them a sign more spectacular than healings so they could believe. Jesus' response again was condemnatory, for he called them a wicked and adulterous generation. They were careful observers of weather signs and could fairly well forecast if the weather would be good or threatening. Yet they had been surrounded by spiritual signs relating to the person of Jesus Christ and had missed them all. Such a wicked generation would not receive any special treatment. The only sign they would receive would be the sign of Jonah. Let's look at verse number 5. And the disciples came to the other side of the sea, but they had forgotten to bring any bread. And Jesus said to them, watch out and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. They began to discuss this among themselves, saying, he said that because we did not bring any bread. But Jesus, aware of this, said, you men of little faith, why do you discuss among yourselves that you have no bread? Look at the bullets. As Jesus left the religious leaders, he warned his disciples against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees to whom he had just spoken. Jesus' mention of yeast caused the disciples to think he referred to their having forgotten to bring along bread. But Jesus explained that he was not referring to the lack of bread. He reminded them of previous occasions when he had multiplied loaves and fish so that food was left over. Let's read verse 9 now. He says to them, do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets full you picked up? Or the 7 loaves or the 4,000 and how many large baskets full you picked up? How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread? But beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Then they understood. They did not say to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now let's look at the bullets. The amount of food was not the issue, for Jesus could care for such a need if it arose. But they were not trusting him for that. They were of little faith. Jesus then simply repeated the warning. The teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees was like pervasive yeast penetrating and corrupting the nation. Let's read verse 13 now. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he was asking his disciples, Who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah, one of the prophets. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Now look at the bullets. Jesus and his disciples went north to Caesarea Philippi. There, Jesus questioned the disciples about their faith in him. Their replies were all flattering. People were identifying Jesus with John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. All of these answers, of course, were wrong. He then asked the disciples, but who do you say that I am? Speaking for the disciples, Peter spoke, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter thus acknowledged Jesus' deity as the Son of the living God. The disciples had come to this conclusion as they observed the Lord Jesus over a period of time, witnessed the miracles, and heard his words. Verse 17, and Jesus said to Peter, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but Father who is in heaven." Now we look at the next verse. "I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven." Then he warned the disciples that they should tell no one that he was the Christ. Look at the bullets. Peter was blessed because he had come to a correct conclusion about the person of Christ, and because great blessing would be brought into his life. The Lord added, however, this was not a conclusion Peter had determined by his own or others' ability. God, the Father in heaven, had revealed that to him. Jesus added that upon this rock, Petra, I will build my church. Building his church was a yet future work of Jesus Christ. The program of the nation of Israel had to be concluded before another program could be set into motion. This is probably why Jesus said not even the gates of Hades would overcome this new program. Thus, Jesus was telling the disciples his death would not prevent his work of building the church. Now let's read verse 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised up on the third day. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke Jesus, saying, "God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you." But Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but on man's." Look at the bullets. Jesus explained to his disciples that his death was near. It would be necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, suffer many things there at the hands of the religious leaders. Eventually he would be killed, but he would rise again from the dead on the third day. Peter, hearing this, took the Lord aside and began to rebuke him. The disciple who had been just blessed by the Master obviously did not fully comprehend the Master's plan. Peter's rebuke, however, brought a rebuke from the Lord, for Peter was playing the role of Satan. Jesus directly addressed Satan, who was seeking to use Peter as his instrument. Trying to thwart the crucifixion, as Satan had earlier tried to do, resulted from not thinking from God's viewpoint at all. Verse 24, we see that then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then repay every man according to his deeds. Truly, I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." And now we look at the bullets. Jesus showed that discipleship involves a cost and does not mean one enjoys glory immediately. A person who would follow Jesus must deny himself and all his ambitions. He must take his cross and follow Jesus. The path Jesus and his followers would travel would be a road of sorrow and suffering, but in so losing one's life, one would truly find a better life. Jesus then spoke prophetically of his second coming, when he would return in his Father's glory with his angels. At that time, the Lord will reward his servants for their faithfulness. Speaking of his return, led Jesus to state that some disciples standing there with him at that time would be permitted to view him transfigured in his glory before they would die. And that concludes our lesson on our lecture on chapter 16.